The forest of the Shadow Fang Pack was a place of deep shadows and whispered secrets, where the towering pine trees stood like silent, judging guardians. It was in this vast, green gloom that a young woman named Ayla had spent her entire life, always feeling the chill of being an outsider, even within the walls of her own home. She was a quiet soul, with eyes the color of a stormy sky and a heart that felt too much. From the time she was a small pup, Ayla knew she was different. It wasn't just that she was quieter than the others, or that she preferred the company of the ancient trees to the loud, rough housing of the pack's youth. It was a secret that hummed just beneath her skin, a strange and gentle power that she had learned, through harsh lessons, to keep completely hidden. This power was a soft, glowing light that lived in her hands. When one of the pack's warriors sprained an ankle during training, a simple touch from Ayla could ease the swelling and mend the tiny tears in the muscle. When a young wolf would work themselves into a furious, snarling rage, just Ayla's calm presence nearby could slowly drain the anger away, leaving behind a confused but peaceful mind. She called it her quiet magic, and she used it only in the deepest solitude of the woods, or in desperate, unseen moments, for she knew the consequences of being discovered. The Shadow Fang Pack, under its harsh alpha named Roran, valued only strength, brute force, and strict obedience. Anything different, anything soft or mysterious, was seen as a weakness or worse, a threat. Alpha Roran was a man built of anger and suspicion. He ruled not with the respect of his people but with their fear. His eyes, a cold, flinty gray, were always scanning his pack for any sign of disobedience or difference. He had always watched Ayla with a particular distrust, sensing a strangeness about her that he could not name, and it made him deeply uneasy. Ayla, for her part, kept her head down and did her duties, dreaming of a life where she didn't have to hide, where the strange warmth in her hands could be a gift and not a curse. Her only solace came from a memory, a secret so precious and warm she tucked it away in the safest part of her heart. It was the memory of a man. Months ago, during the gathering of the packs where wolves from all territories came to meet, she had wandered away from the noisy crowds and found herself by a moonlit lake. There she met him. His name was Stellan. He was not from her pack, and he carried an air of quiet authority that was nothing like Roran's loud brutality. He was strong and handsome, with eyes that held the warmth of the sun, and he spoke to her not as a strange, quiet girl, but as someone fascinating. For 3 magical nights they met by that lake. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams. He made her feel seen and valued and beautiful. On their last night, under a blanket of 1,000 stars, their connection deepened into something more, a passionate and tender romance that left Ayla's heart forever changed. He had to leave suddenly, called away on urgent king's business, he'd said, promising with a fierce look in his eyes that he would find her again. He was gone before she could even tell him her pack's name, and he left her with a piece of his soul, and a secret growing inside of her. She was carrying his twins. Now, her secret pregnancy was well hidden beneath loose clothing, but the babies were a constant, fluttering presence, a reminder of her love for Stellan and the terrifying uncertainty of her future. She knew she could not hide her condition, or the strange strengthening of her powers that came with it, for much longer. The pack's main gathering was tonight, a full moon ceremony where every wolf was required to be present. A great bonfire roared in the center of the clearing, casting dancing, monstrous shadows on the faces of the pack members. They were celebrating a successful hunt, and the air was thick with the smell of roasting meat and the potent energy of werewolves reveling in their own strength. Ayla stood at the very edge of the firelight, trying to make herself small and invisible. The trouble started with a young, hot-headed warrior named Finn. He had drunk too much spiced mead and had gotten into a shouting match with another wolf. The argument escalated, and in a flash of anger and too much drink, Finn began to lose control. His body started to shudder, his bones cracking as he started to shift into his wolf form prematurely, a dangerous and feral state where reason is lost and only rage remains. His claws ripped from his fingertips, and his snout elongated into a snarling muzzle, but his eyes were wild, without a trace of the boy he was. He was turning rogue right in the middle of the pack. Chaos erupted. Wolves scrambled back, mothers pulling their children away. Alpha Roran stood up, his face a mask of fury, but he was too far away to act immediately. The feral wolf, Finn, lunged toward a group of terrified young pups. Ayla didn't think. Her body moved on an instinct deeper than fear, an instinct to protect the innocent. She ran forward, placing herself directly between the snarling beast and the cowering pups. A collective gasp went through the crowd. "Ayla, no," someone shouted. But she stood her ground, her hands raised, not in a fighting stance but in a gesture of peace. As the wild wolf leaped toward her, a soft, golden light erupted from Ayla's palms. It was not a harsh or violent light, but a warm, radiant glow that enveloped the frenzied animal. The light touched his fur, and his furious snarls died in his throat. His wild, rolling eyes cleared, the red rage fading away, replaced by confusion and then fear. His body shuddered again and he shifted back into his human form, collapsing to the ground, exhausted and sobbing. Silence fell over the entire pack. The only sound was the crackling of the bonfire. Every single eye was locked on Ayla, on her hands, which still faintly glowed. The secret she had guarded her whole life was now exposed for all to see. Alpha Roran strode forward, his heavy boots crushing the earth. His face was pale with a fury that was colder and more dangerous than any hot anger. He looked from the healed, sobbing Finn then back to Ayla, his lip curled in utter disgust. Witchcraft, he spat, the words slicing through the silent air. I always knew there was something unnatural about you. Ayla tried to explain, her voice trembling. I was only trying to help. I was protecting the pups. But Roran would not listen. Fear of the unknown had sealed her fate. This strange magic is a poison to our pack, he roared, his voice echoing through the trees. A true daughter of the moon relies on tooth and claw, not on this human trickery. You are a danger to every wolf here. You are cast out, banished from the Shadowfang pack forever. Leave these lands now, and if you are ever seen near our borders again, you will be shown no mercy. The words hit Ayla like physical blows. Banished. It was a death sentence for a werewolf, to be cut off from the safety and community of their pack. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not beg. She saw the fear and agreement in the eyes of the pack members she had grown up with. Not a single one stepped forward to defend her. Her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. With her head held as high as she could manage, she turned her back on the only home she had ever known. She walked away from the firelight, into the cold, dark embrace of the unknown forest, with nothing but the clothes on her back. The cold night air bit at her skin, but a fiercer, more protective warmth burned in her belly. She was alone, hunted and terrified. But she was not just one. She wrapped her arms around her stomach, protecting the 2 tiny, flickering lives within her. The secret children of the Alpha King, Stellan, the man who had no idea that his beloved and his heirs were now alone in the wilderness, fighting for their survival. The forest beyond the Shadowfang territory was a different world, a vast and unforgiving expanse that did not care for Ayla's sorrow or her fragile condition. The first few days were a blur of pure survival, a desperate struggle against the elements and the gnawing emptiness in her heart. Every cracking twig was a sentry coming to finish the job, every howl in the distance was Roran's warriors hunting her down. She slept fitfully in the hollows of ancient trees, curled tightly around her stomach, the growing lives within her the only source of warmth in the chilling cold. Her body ached with a fatigue that was more than just physical exhaustion. It was the soul-deep weariness of being utterly and completely alone. She was a werewolf without a pack, a creature of community cast into a silent, solitary nightmare. The memory of the bonfire, of the disgust in Roran's eyes and the fearful silence of her packmates, played over and over in her mind like a cruel taunt. Yet, with every painful memory, another warmer one would surface to fight it back. The memory of Stellan's face, the sound of his voice, the feel of his hands. He was a ghost that haunted her with hope, a promise made under the stars that felt like a lifetime ago. She wondered if he ever thought of her, if he had tried to find her, or if their magical night was just a fleeting moment for him, the powerful Alpha King. She had no way of knowing he was now the most powerful wolf in all the lands, his reach longer and his will stronger than she could possibly imagine. All she knew was that he was gone and she was on her own. Her salvation came in the form of a forgotten place. After a week of wandering, weak and dizzy with hunger, she stumbled through a thicket of thorny brambles and found herself at the edge of a small, hidden clearing. In its center stood a dilapidated hunter's cabin, its wood weathered to a soft silver gray, its windows boarded up, and its roof sagging in the middle. It was a sorry sight, but to Ayla, it was a palace. It offered the one thing she desperately needed, shelter. Using the last of her strength, she pried open a stubborn window and climbed inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay, but it was dry and, most importantly, it was hidden. This would be her home. The days turned into weeks and Ayla's life fell into a new, lonely rhythm. Her body began to change, her waist thickening and a gentle roundness becoming unmistakable beneath her worn clothes. The flutters inside her, which she had first dismissed as nerves, grew into distinct, deliberate movements. It was no longer a secret she could keep from herself. She was unquestionably, beautifully pregnant. The reality was terrifying, but it also ignited a ferocity in her she never knew she possessed. She was no longer just fighting for herself, she was a mother, a protector. She began the slow, painstaking work of making the cabin livable. She swept out years of grime, patched the worst of the holes in the roof with moss and mud, and fashioned a bed from piles of dry ferns and an old musty blanket she found in a trunk. Her hidden magic, the very thing that had gotten her banished, became her greatest tool for survival. When her fingers grew raw from scrubbing, she would cup her hands and let the warm, golden light wash over them, soothing the aches and healing the scrapes. When she struggled to lift a heavy branch to bar the door, a surge of that same energy would flow through her muscles, giving her the strength she needed. She learned to extend this power beyond her own body. She would walk the perimeter of her small clearing, her hands gently skimming the brambles and the bushes, imbuing them with a subtle, protective energy. It was not a wall or a fence, but a feeling, a whisper on the wind that would gently discourage any large predator from venturing too close, making them feel uneasy and unwelcome. It was a silent, invisible shield woven from her own life force, all to protect the two precious hearts beating within her. As her pregnancy progressed, her connection to the twins deepened into a constant, silent conversation. She would talk to them as she foraged for roots and berries, describing the different plants and which ones were safe to eat. She would sing to them at night, soft, wordless lullabies her own mother had sung to her, a voice trembling with loneliness the only sound in the dark cabin. She told them stories, her most cherished ritual. "Your father," she would whisper, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, "is the bravest and strongest man in the world. He has eyes that hold the sun and a voice that sounds like safety. He doesn't know about you yet, my little loves, but he would move mountains to get to you. He would cross oceans." She painted a picture of Stellan with her words, creating a legend for her children, a hero who would one day come for them. In these quiet moments, the love she still felt for him was a tangible thing, a warm cloak she wrapped around herself and her babies against the cold of her reality. It was a love untouched by bitterness, a pure, steady flame that refused to be extinguished. Meanwhile, in a grand stone palace far to the north, the object of her devotion was living in a gilded cage of his own making. Stellan, the Alpha King, sat at the head of a massive oak table, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. Maps were spread out before him, reports from every corner of his kingdom, but he heard none of it. His mind was 1,000 miles away, trapped in the memory of a moonlit lake and a girl with stormy eyes. The throne room was magnificent, adorned with tapestries and banners, but to him, it felt hollow and empty. The weight of his crown was nothing compared to the aching emptiness in his chest, a hollow space that had once been filled by Ayla's presence. He had returned from his urgent mission months ago, his first and only thought to find her. But she was gone, vanished like morning mist. He had no last name, no packed name, nothing but the memory of her face and the scent of wildflowers in her hair. His wolf, a powerful beast that usually slept content within him, was restless and agitated, constantly pacing the edges of his mind, howling a silent cry of loss for its mate. His best friend in Beta, Kale, watched him with growing concern. He saw the way Stellan's eyes would grow distant in the middle of a council meeting, the way he would stand on his balcony for hours, staring south as if he could somehow summon her back by will alone. "You are not sleeping, Stellan," Kale said one evening, finding the king in his private chambers. "The kingdom needs its king present, not lost in a dream." Stellan turned, and the raw pain in his eyes was startling. "It's not a dream, Kale," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "It's a piece of me that's missing. I can feel it. I can feel her. Something is wrong. I feel a pull, a constant ache in my soul, and it's getting stronger." He confessed the entire story then. The secret meetings, the deep connection that went beyond a simple flirtation, the passionate night they had shared, and the devastating emptiness of returning to find her gone without a trace. "She is my mate, Kale. I'm certain of it. And I have lost her." The conviction in his voice was absolute. The very next morning he made a declaration. He would begin a formal search. He would travel to every pack, visit every territory and personally question every alpha. He would not rest until he had scoured every inch of his kingdom. He had to find her. He had to know if the woman who held his heart was safe, completely unaware that the pull he felt, the growing ache in his soul, was the echo of his own children growing, their heartbeats a faint twin rhythm calling out to their father across the vast silent miles. The weight of the Alpha King's crown felt heavier with each passing day, a cold, metallic circle that seemed to press down on Stellan's brow, a constant reminder of his duty warring with his heart. The grand palace, with its soaring stone arches and bustling halls, had become a prison of polished marble and echoing footsteps. Every room was too empty, every silence too loud, because it was filled with the ghost of a woman who was not there. His wolf, a powerful presence that had always been a source of strength and certainty, was now a creature of pure, restless agony. It paced the confines of his soul, a low, constant growl of loss and frustration that vibrated through Stellan's very bones. The memory of Ayla was no longer a sweet, distant dream. It was a sharp, physical pain, a hook lodged deep in his chest, pulling him relentlessly toward a place he could not find. He would catch her scent on a random breeze, a phantom whisper of wildflowers and rain, only to have it vanish, leaving him more hollowed out than before. The council meetings were a special kind of torture. He would sit on his throne listening to reports of border disputes and harvest yields, while his mind was consumed by a single desperate question. Where was she? His beta, Kale, was the only one who understood the depth of the king's torment. He saw the shadows under Stellan's eyes, the way his hand would sometimes drift to his own chest, as if trying to soothe an unseen wound. "The bond is real, my friend," Kale said one evening, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. He found Stellan in the royal gardens, staring at the moon as if it held the answers he sought. "I have never seen a wolf react this way to a lost connection. It is not just longing, it is a tether. And if it is pulling you so fiercely, then she is still out there. Your wolf would know if she were gone." Those words, spoken aloud, ignited a new, desperate hope in Stellan. The very next morning he set his kingdom's vast resources into motion. He could no longer sit and wait. He dispatched scouts to the farthest reaches of his lands, carrying detailed descriptions of Ayla's face, her eyes, the sound of her voice. But he knew in his heart that this was a task for the king himself. Only he could follow the fragile, invisible thread of the mate bond that tugged him ever southward. He and Kale began their own journey, a solemn pilgrimage from pack to pack, a king in search of his queen. Their travels took them through dense, unfamiliar forests and across rolling, windswept hills. They were greeted with honor and feasts, but Stellan had no patience for ceremony. His questions were always the same, his focus razor-sharp. "Have you seen a young woman with hair like dark silk and eyes the color of a gathering storm? She is quiet, kind, and there is a light about her." The answers were always a variation of no. Some alphas were sympathetic, others were confused by their king's single-minded pursuit of one seemingly ordinary girl. With each dead end, the gnawing worry in Stellan's gut grew. The pull in his chest was becoming a constant, throbbing ache, a sensation of urgency that was slowly driving him mad. It was during a restless night in a guest chamber of the Howling Crag Pack that the feeling sharpened into a blade. He bolted upright in bed, his heart hammering against his ribs, a cold sweat coating his skin. He had dreamed of her, not a pleasant memory but a vision of terror. He saw Ayla running through a dark wood, her face pale and streaked with tears, her eyes wide with fear. He saw her stumble and he felt a searing pain, not his own, lance through his body. He woke with her name on his lips, the echo of her panic still clinging to him. "We leave at first light," he told a sleep-fogged Kale, his voice leaving no room for argument. "The Shadow Fang territory is next. I can feel it. She is close and she is in danger." The journey to the Shadow Fang lands was a blur of impatience and growing dread. The landscape began to look familiar, the trees taking on the same dark, imposing character as those from his dream. When they finally arrived at the border, they were met not with a welcoming party, but with a patrol of surly, suspicious guards. The atmosphere of the pack was tense and fearful, a far cry from the strength and unity a healthy pack should possess. Alpha Roran himself came to greet them, his smile a thin, practiced gesture that did not reach his cold, flinty eyes. He bowed deeply, his voice dripping with a false respect that set Stellan's teeth on edge. "Alpha King," Roran said, spreading his arms wide. "The Shadow Fang pack is honored by your presence. To what do we owe this great privilege?" Stellan wasted no time on pleasantries. He stepped forward, his royal authority radiating from him in an almost visible wave. "I am searching for a woman," he stated, his voice cutting through the tense air. He gave the description again, his every word laced with a possessiveness and concern he did not bother to hide. "Her name is Ayla. I have reason to believe she was from these lands." A flicker of something dark and panicked crossed Roran's face, so fast Stellan almost missed it. It was quickly schooled into an expression of grave regret. "Ayla," Roran repeated, shaking his head with a practiced sigh. "Yes, she was one of ours. A quiet, troubled girl. It grieves me to tell you this, my king, but she is gone. He spun his web of lies with the skill of a born manipulator. He spoke of Ayla's strangeness, her inability to fit in. He painted a picture of a girl who was restless and unhappy. She ran away, Roran said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Months ago. We believe she left with a rogue wolf from a passing trader group. She abandoned her pack, her home, without a backward glance. We have not seen her since, and we have written her off as lost. The words were like physical blows to Stellan. A cold numbness began to spread through his veins, threatening to extinguish the fiery hope that had driven him for so long. Run away. With another? It did not fit with the woman he remembered, with the profound connection they had shared. His wolf recoiled inside him, a snarl of pure denial echoing in his mind. But the alpha was so certain, his story so detailed. The loyal pack members standing behind him nodded in somber agreement, their faces masks of collective shame for their former member. Standing there, surrounded by the evidence of Roran's deceit, Stellan felt the first seeds of devastating doubt take root in his heart. The fierce, pulling bond he felt seemed to falter, muffled by the weight of Roran's lies. He gave a stiff, curt nod, his world crumbling at his feet. He and Kale were led to guest quarters, the promise of a feast in their honor feeling like a mockery. As night fell, Stellan stood by the window, looking out at the dark, oppressive forest. The ache in his soul was now a gaping wound. He had found the trail, only for it to lead to the most painful conclusion imaginable. He had lost her not to danger but to her own will. He had been forgotten. Yet, as he stared into the darkness, a tiny, stubborn ember of his love refused to die. It whispered that the bond he felt was real, that the pain was too sharp for her to be simply gone. He just didn't know how to find her in the vast, silent wilderness that had swallowed her whole, unaware that the source of his agony was not a memory, but a living, breathing reality growing just beyond the tree line. The silence in the Shadow Fang guest quarters was thick and heavy, broken only by the low crackle of the dying fire in the hearth. Stellan stood like a statue by the window, his broad shoulders set in a line of tense despair. The forest outside was a wall of impenetrable black, mirroring the turmoil in his soul. Roran's words echoed in his mind, a toxic refrain. She ran away. She left with another. The images they conjured were like shards of glass in his heart. He tried to reconcile the memory of the sincere, captivating woman by the lake with the image of a fickle girl who would abandon her pack. It was a square peg forced into a round hole. It did not fit, yet the alpha's certainty in the pack's unified front had sown a devastating doubt. His wolf, however, was having none of it. The beast within him was enraged, not grieving. It clawed at the edges of his control, a raw, primal force that rejected the lies with every fiber of its being. It did not howl in sorrow but in furious, possessive denial. Mars. Danger. The instincts were a screaming alarm in his blood that he was trying and failing to quiet with logic. Kale watched his king from across the room, his own heart heavy. He had seen the light in Stellan's eyes extinguish upon hearing Roran's tale. We will leave at first light, Kale said, his voice soft but firm. This place reeks of deceit. I do not trust that alpha as far as I could throw him. Stellan gave a barely perceptible nod, his gaze still locked on the darkness. Perhaps you are right, he murmured, the words tasting like ash. But if she is not here, then where, Kale? Where could she have gone? He was about to turn away from the window, to surrender to a night of tortured sleep, when it happened. A pain, sharp and searing, lanced through his lower abdomen, so sudden and intense it stole his breath. It was not his pain. It was a phantom agony, a violent ripple through the mate bond that connected him to Ayla. It was followed by a wave of pure, undiluted terror, her terror, that flooded his senses, drowning out all other thought. His wolf erupted to the surface, its roar a silent thunder that shook his very core. His eyes, which had been dull with grief, now blazed with a feral, golden light. Ayla. Her name was a ripped-from-the-soul gasp. He didn't think. He moved. In a single, fluid motion, he shattered the locked window with his forearm, the glass exploding outward in a shower of glittering fragments. He shifted in midair, his human form dissolving into the powerful, massive wolf of the Alpha King. His black fur absorbed the moonlight, and his form was a monument of primal power. Kale, reacting with the ingrained speed of a beta, shifted just a second behind him. The two wolves, one midnight black and the other a stormy gray, hit the forest floor running. Stellan did not need a path. He was a predator pulled by the most powerful instinct of all. The bond was a physical cord, a burning tether that led him unerringly through the tangled undergrowth. He crashed through bushes and leaped over fallen logs, his powerful muscles driving him forward with a speed that was terrifying to behold. Kale struggled to keep pace, his own wolf sensing the king's single-minded frenzy. The world narrowed to the pull in his chest, the scent of her fear growing stronger in his nostrils, mixed with the unmistakable, miraculous scent of life. New life. His mind couldn't process it, his wolf simply accepted it and ran faster. The trees began to thin and a small, dilapidated cabin came into view, a pathetic silhouette against the starry sky. And from within its fragile walls, he heard it, a cry of sheer, unbearable pain. It was Ayla's voice. He shifted back to his human form at the door, not even feeling the cold or the splinters that dug into his bare hands as he slammed his shoulder against the weathered wood. It burst inwards with a sickening crack. The scene inside would be seared into his memory forever. Ayla was on the floor, kneeling on the old blanket, her face ashen and beaded with sweat. Her hands were clenched into fists, her body trembling with the force of a contraction. The air was thick with the scent of blood, sweat, and her unique, wildflower magic, which hung in the air like a desperate prayer. Her eyes, wide with pain and fear, flew to the door. For a heartbeat there was only shock. Then recognition dawned, and with it, a flood of relief so profound it made her weak. "Stellan?" she whispered, his name a broken sob as if she were seeing a ghost she had prayed for every single day. He was at her side in an instant, his own eyes wide with a torrent of emotions, shock, fury at her suffering, and a love so overwhelming it stole his breath. He dropped to his knees, his large, warm hands cradling her face, then moving to grip her hands. "I'm here, Ayla. I'm here," he breathed, his voice rough with emotion. "I found you. I'm so sorry it took me so long." He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the beautiful, painful swell of her stomach, the reality of the situation crashing down on him. "The babies," he said, awe and terror warring in his voice. She could only nod, gritting her teeth as another wave of pain seized her. "They're coming now," she gasped. There was no time for explanations, for the story of Roran's betrayal, for the tale of her lonely exile. There was only this moment, this primal, sacred event. Stellan, the Alpha King who commanded armies, now took command of this tiny dusty cabin. He supported her back, he murmured words of encouragement, his voice a steady, calming anchor in her storm of pain. He used a knife from his discarded clothes to cut a piece of cloth, using water from a bucket to cool her brow. He was her strength, her partner, the father of her children, finally where he belonged. The world outside ceased to exist. Kale, having shifted back, took up a silent, protective vigil at the broken doorway, guarding the most precious moment of his king's life from the outside world. Inside, the cabin was filled with Ayla's labored breathing, Stellan's low, reassuring murmurs, and the potent, golden glow of her magic, which flared with each contraction, a protective cocoon around them. And then, after a final, monumental effort, a tiny, indignant cry pierced the air. A moment later, it was joined by another. 2 perfect, squalling infants were placed into Ayla's waiting arms, and then one was gently transferred to Stellan's trembling, awestruck hands. He looked down at the tiny red-faced baby, his son, and then at the little girl in Ayla's arms. His heart, which had been shattered and then mended with desperate hope in the last hour, now swelled with a love so fierce and pure it was dizzying. Tears, which he had not shed since he was a boy, streamed down his face unchecked. He looked from his children to their mother, his mate, his Ayla. Her eyes were full of exhausted, radiant love. In that dusty, secluded cabin, surrounded by the evidence of her survival and the miracles of new life, Stellan knew the truth with absolute clarity. He had not just found his lost love. He had found his family, his future, and the reason for his entire kingdom. The search was over. The real journey was just beginning. The return of the Alpha King to his palace was not a quiet affair. It was a procession that would be sung about for generations. But it was not the king alone who rode at its head. By his side, held with a protective, reverent tenderness, was Ayla. And cradled securely in their arms, swaddled in the finest silks, were the twin heirs to the entire werewolf kingdom. The news had flown ahead of them on the swiftest of wings, carried by scouts and howled from peak to peak. The king had returned, and he had not returned alone. He brought with him a Luna queen and the future of their people. The streets of the royal city were lined with thousands of wolves, their faces filled with awe and curiosity as they caught their first glimpse of the woman who had captured their king's heart. They saw not a weak, banished girl, but a serene and strong young mother, her stormy eyes holding a quiet wisdom that spoke of trials overcome. And they saw the fierce, proud love in their king's eyes as he looked at her, a love that had clearly moved mountains to be reunited. The palace, which had felt so cold and empty to Stellan for so long, was now filled with a warmth that seemed to radiate from the very stone. Ayla was given chambers that overlooked the sun-drenched gardens, a world away from the dusty, lonely cabin. Servants, led by a kind-hearted older she-wolf named Alara, fussed over her and the babies, their joy at having a Luna and pups in the palace genuine and infectious. But the most profound change was in how Ayla's magic was received. In the Shadow Fang pack it had been a curse. Here, in the heart of the king's domain, it was celebrated as the gift it truly was. When a young guard suffered a deep gash during training, Ayla, with Stellan's proud encouragement, did not hide her light. She approached the injured man and, with a gentle touch, let her golden glow wash over the wound, the skin knitting together before the astonished eyes of the entire court. A stunned silence was followed not by fear, but by a ripple of amazed whispers that grew into a cheer of acceptance and reverence. She was not a witch, she was a healer, a protector, a blessing to their kingdom. There was, however, one matter of justice that could not be ignored. Stellan's rage at Roran's betrayal was a cold, sharp thing, carefully controlled in the presence of his new family but burning with an intense fire. He had lied to his king, an offense punishable by death. He had banished a royal mate, a crime of unimaginable arrogance. And he had caused Ayla and his unborn heirs untold suffering and danger. A week after their return, a formal royal summons was sent. Alpha Roran of the Shadow Fang pack was commanded to appear before the throne to answer for his deeds. He arrived, his arrogance replaced by a palpable, sweating fear. He stood before the dais where Stellan sat, with Ayla beside him, holding their son, while their daughter slept in a bassinet nearby. Stellan did not roar or shout. His voice was quiet, laced with a royal authority that was more terrifying than any outburst. He laid out the truth before the entire court. The lie about Ayla running away, the cruel banishment, the endangerment of the royal heirs. Roran had no defense. His own pack members, when questioned by Stellan's fair but firm beta, Kale, broke under the weight of their guilt and confirmed the true story. Stellan's judgment was swift and decisive. Roran was stripped of his title and his pack. He was banished, just as he had banished Ayla, to wander the wilderness as a lone wolf, forever forbidden from the comfort and safety of any pack. The Shadow Fang pack was placed under the temporary stewardship of Kale, who would help them choose a new, just alpha from among their ranks. It was a punishment that fit the crime perfectly, a lesson in mercy and harsh justice that resonated throughout the kingdom. As Roran was led away in disgrace, a collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the land. A new era of fairness and compassion had begun. The days that followed were a golden time for Stellan and Ayla. They learned the rhythms of parenthood together, their love deepening with every sleepless night and every gurgling smile from their babies. They named their son Ronan, meaning little seal, for his quiet strength, and their daughter Saren, meaning star, for the light she brought into their darkest times. Stellan would often find Ayla in the nursery, singing the same lullabies to their children that she had sung to her stomach in the lonely cabin, but now her voice was filled with joy, not sorrow. One evening, under a sky dusted with a million twinkling stars, Stellan led Ayla to the grand balcony adjoining their chambers. The kingdom slept below them, peaceful and secure. In the quiet, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her head as they looked out at their world. She leaned back into his strong embrace, his warmth a permanent shield against any past cold. "I spent so long searching for you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought my heart would never be whole again." Ayla turned in his arms, her stormy eyes meeting his sun-warmed gaze. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "You found us," she said softly, her love for him shining brighter than any magic. "You will always find us." He leaned down and captured her lips in a kiss that was not one of desperate passion, but of profound promise. It was a kiss that held all the longing of their separation, the joy of their reunion, and the unwavering certainty of their future. It was a seal on their bond, a silent vow under the watchful moon that they would be together, as a family, as rulers, as soulmates, for all the days of their lives. Their unique love story, which began with a secret and was tested by fire and exile, was now the foundation upon which a new, brighter kingdom was being built, a tale of the Alpha King and his queen who carried the quiet, powerful magic of love in her heart. Their story of love, loss, and triumphant reunion may have reached its happy ending, but the world of the werewolves is vast and filled with many more tales waiting to be told. If you want to be the first to discover the next great romance, the next hidden power, or the next secret heir, make sure to subscribe. A new adventure is always just on the horizon, waiting for you to find it.